Hey, good morning, week 16 of the NFL season, and welcome to the Football Diehards Sunday DFS show with the talented and popular Jason Brady and the old man of fantasy, Emil Kadlec. How's it going, Brady?
It's going pretty good. Week 16, so almost through the end of the season here, and really looking forward to this slate. Lots of values open up, and I'm sure we'll talk about and ready to win some money today.
Fantastic. And of course, let's do a quick review of the injury situation, the COVID situation. I may not have everything here, but I've got a lot of crazy stuff that's going on. I'll start just at the top of this list, which is semi-random. Antonio Gibson is expected to play or will play, and according to the NFL Network's Mike Garofalo, he should have a sizable workload, whatever that means. Baltimore, Hollywood Brown is likely to go, is the verbiage they used. Tyreek Hill is expected to, or will play, excuse me, and Ezekiel Elliott also in the will play category. A handful of those games. Well, actually, Baltimore's an 11 o'clock game for Hollywood, so we'll know that before we have to get our lines official. And let's go with out. We got these all mixed up. Out. Of course, Cleveland, Landry's out, Rashad Higgins is out, Peoples-Jones is out, Hodge is out. So that Marvin Hall, the guy that they got from off waivers or whatever, however they got him from Detroit, and who hasn't even played yet for Cleveland, he's available as a receiver. Jamarcus Bradley's available. Derek Hillies is available, and of course they've got 4 tight ends, including Hooper, Njoku, and Bryant, and Carlson, so they may actually, are going to perhaps get more touches, more opportunities there. Let's see, out. Let's see, I already mentioned that. Clyde Edwards-Helaire supposedly out. Will not play, who aren't out, it's will not play versus out. I love these things. James Robinson for Jacksonville, he's been listed out for a couple of days. And, of course, that leaves Ogumbowolo, I forgot how to pronounce his name, and Ozigbo available. Duke Johnson's been out. Of course, that gives David Johnson more freedom. And Jamal Williams is out, but not officially out yet, and that is an early game, so we'll know that. Or maybe it's not an early. I don't have it written down. Anyway, he's probably not going to play, leaving Aaron Jones with a potential higher number of opportunities. And the Rams, Cam Akers has been ruled out for a while. Not expected to play also is Keenan Allen for the Chargers, which, if that is true, will be disappointing. That's a late game, so we're going to have to make an assumption about that. And also, Mike Glennon is supposed to be starting for Jacksonville. So that's what I've got on that front. I may have missed one or two, but a lot of things going on. So let's start with the quarterbacks.
Let's start with the quarterbacks. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to talk about here, and it did open up a lot of value. So starting with the quarterbacks, and up top, of course, Patrick Mahomes, 8,500 versus Atlanta. And at the beginning of the week, I thought that it was, nearly impossible to have a Chiefs stack just because of how expensive they are. But since all this value's opened up, it actually made it a lot easier to play these Chiefs, and I'm going to go to them a lot. So Patrick Mahomes, 8,500. 54-point game total, which is the highest on the slate, and the Chiefs are going to be 10.5-point favorites. Mahomes averaging 27.8 DraftKings points per game. And like I said, it's expensive, but it's so doable now. Like Marvin Hall, somebody we talked about already, it opened up a ton of things. Great stackable options. Kelsey, Hill, someone who's banged up, but I still think he'll be fine. Sammy Watkins, McCole Hardman, somebody that's really cheap. Just tons of upside against a very poor Falcons defense. And just potential shootout here in a game with the highest total on the slate. I really like Patrick Mahomes, and I'm assuming he's going to be the number 1 owned, and for a really good reason, too.
Just barely the number 2 owned quarterback this week at 15.4%. I'll wait and we'll talk about the other one in a little bit just to tease the audience. But yeah, almost number 1, number 2. 8,500. That's good for you. $8,500 for Mahomes.
Oh yeah,
Fantastic.
yeah. I was expecting him to be the highest owned, so I'm kind of interested to see who the highest owned is.
Sounds good.
All right.
We'll reveal that here shortly.
All right, so getting to the next one, and it is Jalen Hurts, the man who had an absolute insane game last week with he scored like 40 DraftKings points. He is 7,000 priced up versus Dallas here. In this game, it is a 49.5-point game total, which I believe is like the second highest total on the whole slate, where the Eagles are 2-point favorites. 64 DraftKings points in his first 2 starts combined. Tons of rushing yard upside, 29 rushing attempts in his first 2 starts. Has a solid matchup against the Dallas defense. I know Dallas is their defense has gotten a lot better since the beginning of the year, but still, I like the matchup, and I just love this play for cash. Has some tournament upside as well, and this is probably more of a cash game play for me because I just can't figure out who to stack with Jalen Hurts. I think Dallas Goedert is probably the only person I'd stack him with, but outside of that, really hard to trust any of these Eagles wide receivers. So Jalen Hurts for me probably in cash, but I do think he has some tournament upside as well, just with the running game alone. So Jalen Hurts at 7,000 I think is a really solid play today.
And he is the number 1 owned quarterback at 15.7%, just a little bit above Mahomes. Yeah, insane. Him getting like 40 fantasy points last week it was just crazy. It was just unbelievable, and I'm not surprising that people are jumping on this guy against Dallas. Now Dallas has gotten a little better defensively, but that is a very attractive matchup. Kind of hard to not play that a few times.
Oh yeah, so they priced him up from 5,900 last week to 7,000 this week. Big jump up in price.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I mean, that's going to be. I mean, against Dallas, it's hard to think he's going to, fall back or revert back a little bit. He's so young. He's a rookie. He's played 2 games. I mean, officially, he's played, significantly in 2 games. But wow, That was incredible. And certainly can't expect him to score that many points. But at 7,000, it's probably a really good opportunity for us DFSers.
Oh yeah. So the next guy I do want to talk about is going to be Matt Ryan, 5,800 versus Kansas City. Kind of a pump play here. Got that 54-point game total, which is the highest on the slate, with the Falcons being 10.5-point underdogs. And I really do like that from Ryan because that means they should be coming from behind, leading to more passing attempts for Ryan. And he is averaging 18.9 DraftKings points. And what I like about Ryan is he throws the ball a ton in general, averaging over 36 passing attempts per week. I remember last year it was closer to the 50 range, but still a lot of passes nonetheless. Solid stacking options. Julio Jones is not playing, but they still have Ridley, Gage, and even Hayden Hurst is a fine option to stack with. Just touchdown upside and what has the highest game on total on the slate. And last week he did throw the ball 49 times against the Buccaneers. Kind of can expect the same amount of times this time in a game that they should be trailing against the Chiefs. So 5,800 for somebody that's going to throw the ball a ton. I think it's a decent play here.
Oh, that's an excellent point. 5.8% owned, so relatively low owned, which is definitely attractive. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting play at Kansas City. Yeah, that's going to be a good one. I like that.
Yes. And then the last guy I want to throw out here is going to be Deshawn Watson for Houston, going in Cincinnati here, 7,600. I think it's a nice pivot off of the higher-owned guys like Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes. Just love the matchup here versus the Bengals. Great affordable stacking options as well. Brandon Cooks, Kiki Cutie, and lots of upside in a game in a solid total. So Deshaun Watson, I like him here. He can run the ball a little bit as well. And at 7,600, I like it. And I'm curious to hear the ownership because it could be a nice pivot off these other guys.
Yeah, he's actually the 4th most owned quarterback, 7.9%, down a lot percentage-wise from the top guys, but definitely 7.9%. How's that sound for you?
Yeah, I don't mind it. I don't mind it. But other than that, I wanted to play Baker Mayfield earlier in the week, but now that he has no wide receivers to throw to, I'm probably going to stay away. So anybody else you wanted to throw out?
Well, I'll throw this name out again. I'm the guy who gets to throw out these quirky, bizarre things. Now, Ben Roethlisberger is 1.8% owned. He's less than 2% owned. And obviously he has the ability to play well. Indianapolis is a good defense. Indianapolis, is they're fighting for playoff position. The game's in Pittsburgh. The problem is it's a three-headed monster at wide receiver. So I don't know who you match him up with, but that's a pretty low percentage owned for a guy like Ben Roethlisberger. We've lost faith in him.
Yeah, we have a lot of people lost faith. I mean, he's 1% owned, but the thing about Ben is he throws the ball a ton, and they're at home, and hopefully they want to play better because they just lost to the Bengals. So I don't hate that at all. And like you mentioned, 300 monster. I'd probably pair him with somebody we'll talk about in Deontay Johnson. But yeah, it's not a bad play, especially at the ownership of 1%. That's interesting.
Yeah, 1.8, just a little under 2.
Wow.
That's
yeah,
pretty low. He's of the top 20ish. He's down there at the bottom. So.
Oh yeah. All right, so we'll move into.
That's all my quirky plays for quarterback.
I like it. All right, we'll move into the running backs here. We'll start up top with Nick Chubb, 7,800 versus the Jets. Got a 45-point game total, which has been dropping ever since the news has came out that they're not going to have any wide receivers, basically. And the Browns are 7-point favorites. And Chubb is averaging 18.9 DraftKings points per week, and he should see around 15 to 20 touches. I love the matchup and the game script versus the Jets here. And the Browns are missing a ton of weapons on offense, which should make the Browns lean on Chubb more, you'd think. And the Browns should be out ahead, leading to more carries for Chubb. And the only thing that worries me is Kareem Hunt is going to get a significant amount of snaps, and they do share snaps. That's the only thing that concerns me. But when he does run the ball, he's very, very good. I think at 7,800 is not a bad play. So Chubb, I just like the game script. I think they're going to be out ahead and run the ball a ton.
Yeah, he's the 4th most owned running back, 14.5%. I think if the worry I have is with all those receivers out, including Landry, are they going to not get as many snaps at offense? Are they able to extend drives? And if they can do that with Chubb and Hunt and get enough drives and score enough points, then both those running backs would be viable. And that fear of yours about Hunt may not happen. Hey, maybe they'll even throw Chubb a couple balls like they did a few weeks ago.
That'd be nice.
Definitely high owned.
Oh yeah, as expected though. The next guy I'm assuming is maybe one of the highest owned, if not the highest owned running back on the slate. That's going to be David Montgomery, 7,700 versus Jacksonville. 47.5-point game total where the Bears are going to be 7.5-point favorites. And the last month for Montgomery has been insane. And I'll be honest, I was not a believer, but now I'm starting to get on the Montgomery train here. Games of 32, 27, 27, 28. In his last 4 games, had 33 total touches last week against the Vikings, and he has an even better matchup here against a poor Jacksonville run defense, and the Jaguars have given up the 3rd most DraftKings points to opposing running backs. It's really hard to ignore the success that Montgomery's been having, and it's really hard to ignore the matchup and the volume that he's been getting. So at 7,700, I know it's going to be popular, but I think it's a really solid play here versus Jacksonville.
Wow. Yeah, he is the number 2 most owned running back at 27.1%. So definitely a popular play. Yeah, like you said, everything's good for that. I still can't figure out what happened. This guy, I've finally given up. I've finally given up on David Montgomery like about a month and a half, or by the beginning of the season. I gave up on him. And then he had the big game, and it's just like, what? Now I'm dazed and confused, but what a great matchup. I guess 7,700 isn't too bad considering what he's been doing, and he's against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy
to ignore that.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that he was 5,300 just a couple games ago. Now he's 7,700.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah. So, getting into the next one here, we have Le'Veon Bell, 5,800 versus Atlanta. You got the 54-point game total where the Chiefs are going to be 10.5-point favorites. Is averaging 7 DraftKings points per week, and just a great price for Bell here at 5,800 with Clyde Edwards-Helaire out. Should be giving Bell a huge opportunity here versus a poor Atlanta defense. Just a potential shootout here, in which should lead to some touchdowns for Bell, and the Chiefs being big favorites could lead to more Bell carries. And I think Bell just put into one of the best, if not the best, offenses in the league. Should have some success here at a really cheap price of 5,800.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's the 6th most owned, 12.9%. Not surprising that he goes up. I'm annoyed at Bell. I just am annoyed at the guy, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't play him this week. What is that? 5,800. That's a good price. Yeah. A lot of things could happen there. Could you think he can handle a full load if they end up running him maybe 15 times and throwing to him 5 or 7 times? What do you think?
I think he could. I just don't know if they will or not. I think he'll get some decent work though.
Yeah, he's definitely a guy. I probably won't pick him because I'm mad at him. He's annoying.
Understandable.
That is so childish, but that's where my mind's at.
Yeah.
But yeah, 12.9% owned.
I like it, actually. I thought he was going to be higher owned than that, honestly.
Yeah. Oh, okay, good.
Yeah. All right, so this next one's interesting. It's going to be Melvin Gordon. And it feels like this is the first time all year I've brought up Melvin Gordon's name, but here I am doing so. And he is 5,600 versus the Chargers. You got a 48-point game total where the Broncos are 3-point underdogs. And Gordon is averaging 13.8 DraftKings points per game. And you got the revenge game narrative versus the Chargers here. And Phillip Lindsay is out, which should give Gordon the majority of the touches here. And it seems way too cheap for the amount of volume he's likely to get here, and just touchdown upside in a sneaky high game total. So Melvin Gordon, 5,600, somebody I'm liking a lot this week.
Yeah, an excellent point. He's definitely going to get some opportunities. He's the third most owned running back at 15.8. So, that's still pretty good for him considering the Denver Broncos. But like you said, $5,600. That's really tempting to put him in a few of your lineups. That's a pretty low number.
Oh, yeah.
With Lindsay out for the year on injury reserve, so Gordon may be an interesting play the following week. Okay, week 17. I can't wait for week 17. It's the most hard to predict week because people just teams just holding people out. But yeah, Gordon's an interesting play this week. Third most owned running back at 15.3%.
I like it. It looks like a lot of other people like it too.
They're on to it.
Oh, yeah. Wonder if they're on this one, and it's a kind of a cheaper play. It's going to be Giovanni Bernard, 4,800. You got the 45.5-point game total, with the Bengals being 8.5-point underdogs. And he's averaging 9.9 DraftKings points per week. So he did have a really rough stretch of 5 games, all scoring under 10 points, and went off against a very tough Pittsburgh defense, which was really weird to see. I mean, he hasn't had success, since he's been named the starter, and then went off against Pittsburgh, had 25 rushing attempts and 1 reception. And I'm not expecting, the same usage here, but it just seems way too cheap here, 4,800. So I'm probably going to go to him quite a bit. I really like the matchup against the Texans, one of the worst, if not the worst, run defense in the league. So 4,800 seems way too cheap for Giovanni Bernard here.
And he's the 11th most owned running back at 8.3%.
It's not bad.
I'm a little surprised, actually, after doing that well against Pittsburgh. I thought he'd be just a scotch up. I realize he had a lot of bad weeks, but it is against Houston. So, 8.3% for Giovanni Bernard. Tempting play, $4,800. Woof.
Yeah, so Houston has given him the most DraftKings points to opposing running backs as well, so very interesting.
Wow.
Yes. So next we have Darrell Henderson Jr., 4,500 versus Seattle. You got the 47.5-point game total, where the Rams are 1.5-point underdogs, averaging 9.1 DraftKings points per week. So Cam Akers is out, and Henderson is very cheap here at 4,500. Should be the lead back and should see an increase in touches with him out as well. And a solid matchup against the Seahawks defense. Not the best match in the world, but it's not nothing crazy, and could be a nice pivot off the Rams passing game as well. So I think Henderson's a fine play. I don't know how much I'm going to go to all that much, but I do think he'll get some decent work at a really cheap price.
$4,500. That's cheap. He is about the 8th most owned running back at 12.7%. So he's up there. He's starting to push up there. He had some pretty good games before Cam Akers finally took that spot over, and he should be he should get more targets than Malcolm Brown.
Mm-hmm.
4,500 is, wow, I don't know. That's pretty darn tempting to me. I find that very, very attractive. Is get him in a few of my plays.
Yeah, especially when the Rams run the ball a ton. Yeah. It is very intriguing. And
he catches the ball. He can catch the ball.
Yeah,
so
he can.
Dual threat there.
Yes. All right, so I do want to touch on these last two quickly here. Austin Eckler, 7,600. Of course, what I like about Eckler is he's going to get a lot of targets, going to get a lot of receptions. The only thing that concerns me is going to be the ownership this week. I believe he's number 1 owned, right?
Yeah, number 1 owned.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, he's the number 1 owned. That's kind of concerning there, but the matchup's fine against Denver. 7,600. not a bad look, and I think he's fine in cash going to get the passing game volume. And the only thing I'm concerned about is, like guys like Balaj, like stealing snaps and all that, but he should be fine, should get a lot of work, should get a lot of receptions as well. So Austin Eckler, I think, is a pretty good play. Just the only thing that concerns me is that ownership, and honestly, I'd rather pivot off the Chubb or Montgomery, but I think Austin Eckler is fine as well.
Yeah, he's number one owned, just above Montgomery at 28.6%, and Montgomery was 27. So you got two guys there that are going in over a quarter of lineups, is basically what that's saying. A quarter of lineups, these two guys are in them. Very highly owned, but obviously have been very productive. Denver Broncos, that's a nice team to play against. So yeah, that is a very attractive setup there for Austin Eckler.
Oh, yeah. And then the last guy we do want to mention is going to be David Johnson for the Texans going against the Bengals here. 6,100, averaging 13.4 DraftKings points. Just a very good matchup against this Bengals defense, pass-catching upside. And he did have a crazy 11 receptions last week on 11 targets. I did not... I was shocked when I saw that David Johnson had 11 receptions, scored 27.3 DraftKings points at 5,100. They did price him up 1,000 here. And I like David Johnson here. Duke Johnson's going to be out, so I think he should do fine here against the Bengals defense.
Yeah, interesting. Kind of reminding me of the old David Johnson back in the Arizona days, catching so many balls. I'm so glad to see them throw the ball to David Johnson, but he only got eight rushes for 27 yards. So, we've got to expect this guy to get some throws, to Watson to throw the ball to him again, which maybe they will. Maybe they figured out that's how we can use David Johnson, because I don't know if he's really going to deserve this $6,100 salary on his rushes. He's got to catch the ball. I don't know if we can expect him to catch 11 balls or 10 balls. No, but hopefully he'll catch enough to make that salary worth it. He is a very tempting play against Cincinnati. Yep.
Is anybody else you wanted to throw out?
You nailed the guys I had. I'm just quickly looking down here to see if anything's interesting. I don't know if Ito Smith's that interesting at 4,000. He's supposedly taken over the number one job at running back, but I still don't know if I trust it to play that. So, McKissick's kind of weird. What is he at, though? But he's at $6,400, but he's only 3% owned. But that whole thing worries me. Carolina, whatever. But Gibson's back, and when Gibson's back, ironically, McKissick gets more balls thrown at him. So I don't know if he's worth $6,400. That's a bit high for me. So I don't really. I mean, if you could figure out who's going to be the runner for Jacksonville, whether it's going to be Ozigbo or that other guy I mentioned earlier. If it's Ozigbo, he's a $4,000 guy at 2.4%. But we know nothing about him. And Chicago is in the hunt for the playoffs. I think they still are after last night's game. So I don't know if I would trust playing an unknown like Ozigbo against the Chicago Bears. So I said a few names there, but I don't know if I'm really very excited about playing any of them.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think if McKissick was a couple thousand cheaper, I'd definitely go to him. They did price him up just in case Gibson was not playing, so he's already priced up to like that big price. And even Gibson's, I think Gibson's around the 6,000 range as well. So other than that, yeah, I don't know what to do with the Jacksonville backfield. It's such a bad team. I'm going against a pretty solid defense, and Ito Smith is interesting. But if anything, I think Gibson could be an interesting play because Gibson was going off before he got injured and should be going right back into that role, like you said earlier. And Panthers are actually one of the worst run defenses in the league. They were like dead last at one point, scoring 39.6 DraftKings points against Dallas, 22.5 against Detroit. So if he does get like that 20 touches, I do think he'll be fine. But he's 6,600.
Yeah, he's only $200 more above McKissick. So obviously Antonio Gibson's pretty attractive if you're looking at a Washington running back.
Yep.
And he had that huge game before he got hurt. Well, I cried because I got him in a couple leagues. I may even switch him in a lineup today. I'm talking in season, obviously.
Oh, yeah. Should do fine if he is fully healthy. All right, so getting into the wide receivers here, Starting up top, and Tyreek Hill 9,000 versus Atlanta. 54-point game total where the Chiefs are going to be 10.5-point favorites, and he is averaging 23.4 DraftKings points per game, 17 touchdowns on the year, and over 1,200 receiving yards. Just a dream matchup against this poor Atlanta Falcons passing defense. Falcons are dead last in DraftKings points given up to opposing wide receivers. Multiple touchdown upside and was projected to be the highest total on the slate. The only thing I'm concerned about is Hill is a little banged up, and I don't know if, they get out to a big lead, they're going to sit him, get ready for the playoffs, or if they're going to be, use him very limited. And he is so expensive, so if that happens, it's not a good look. But if he does play, if he is fully healthy, he should have a monster game this week against the Falcons.
And it's an early game, so if there's any, talk about he's going to play the old but limited or stuff like that, you'll know that before you make your final decisions. He's the number one owned wide receiver, so basically DFS players out there are just thinking it's such a great matchup and he's such a great player that he's going to score his points, and they're not worried about the so he's 25.6% owned, the number one owned wide receiver. It's
in a quarter of lineups.
Pardon?
He's in a quarter of all lineups. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's pretty significant.
But yeah, it definitely deserves, because he's been having a monster second half of the season. It's been insane. It seems like every touchdown is going to Tyreek Hill. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's fun when you got him. As far as in season, Of course, he's a fun play in DFS if you can pay for him. If you can find a way to mix your lineup up and pay for him, which is doable.
Yep. So next we have another really expensive guy, and that is Calvin Ridley, 8,500 versus Kansas City. You got the 54-point game total where the Falcons are going to be 10.5-point underdogs, and I really do like that Ridley. That means they're going to be coming from behind more than likely, and he is averaging 21.1 DraftKings points per game. Julio Jones is not playing, giving Ridley another huge opportunity here. Just tons of upside in a game that the Falcons should be trailing. Maybe some potential garbage time upside if the Falcons fall too far behind as well, and just touchdown upside overall in what is the highest total on the slate. So Calvin Ridley at 8,500, I like it a lot. I think there's a ton of upside. Had a really good game last week as well.
Yeah, number two owned wide receiver at 23%. So
wow.
He's up there. Obviously, he's going to get opportunities with Julio Jones out, and he's produced. So Kansas City, that's not a bad lineup. I don't think their defense is that great. So
yeah, what I like about that is they're going to be coming from behind and probably throwing the ball a lot, you'd think. I don't think they're going to be running the ball much when they're going to be down, probably.
That's a good point.
Yep. All right, next play here we have Deontay Johnson, 6,300 versus the Colts. You got a 43-point game total, which is one of the lowest on the slate. And the Steelers are going to be 1.5-point favorites. And he is averaging 15 DraftKings points per game, the number one pass-catching option on the Steelers. And what I like about the Steelers is they throw the ball a ton no matter what. And he's averaging 12.6 targets per game in the games where he's fully healthy. And it seems way too cheap for the amount of upside that Johnson brings. And it should be lower owned here with the tough matchup against the Colts. But I still think he brings that upside. And I think that the Steelers passing the ball so much still at 6,300, that seems too cheap there. And even last week, the Steelers did absolutely awful against the Bengals. He still had 13 targets, 8 receptions, 19.9 DraftKings points. If the Steelers can get it together, I think Deontay Johnson has a lot of upside here at probably low ownership, or at least I hope.
5.6% owned, so that's relatively low.
Nice.
Like you said, he produced last week, even though it was an ugly game and they lost. He seemed to be more. He didn't drop. I don't recall him dropping a ball, so maybe that scenario is over with. So that is an interesting play, and Indianapolis defense has been fairly good. But you're at home. Pittsburgh's at home, and both teams are fighting for playoff position. So, in Pittsburgh, what have they lost 3 in a row now? This is a huge game for them.
Yes.
And when I like these huge games, I like, especially Pittsburgh at home. They've historically always come through. So, excellent play for Deontay Johnson in my book, also.
Yeah, I like it a lot. All right, this next one's very interesting. It's going to be T. Higgins, 4,700 versus Houston. 45.5-point game total where the Bengals are 8.5-point underdog, which I do like that for Higgins here. So Tyler Boyd is not expected to play or is out already with a concussion. And since Boyd is out, Higgins should be in line for more targets. And he is averaging 8 targets in his last 7 games. Very good matchup against this poor Houston defense. And like I mentioned, should be coming from behind, leading to more passing for the Bengals. And just seems way too cheap here for T. Higgins in general. Even if Boyd was playing, I still think it'd be a little bit too cheap. But since Boyd is out, I think it makes Higgins a really good player at 4,700.
Yeah, ironically, that was one of my guys I was going to mention as a quirky play. $4,700. He's the 4th most owned receiver, 14.1%. So it's down a lot, obviously, from the top guys you would expect. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you still, in the back of your head, you're still thinking about who's throwing to him. What quality of players is throwing to him. But they've been able to, produce. And like you said, Boyd's out. He's an interesting play. I kind of was hoping he wouldn't be as highly owned as the 4th most owned wide receiver, but $4,700, and he has put up some games. So I like that play. I think Higgins is an interesting guy.
Yeah, I mean, if Joe Burrow was throwing to him, I'd probably be all in. But like you mentioned, the quarterback situation
would probably be higher too.
Yeah, that is true. So yeah, I think it's a really good play there. But yeah, the ownership is it's interesting for sure.
Now you realize Finley last week against Pittsburgh threw for 89 yards and a touchdown. Not
that's great.
There. He threw to Giovanni Bernard, or who caught the ball, but
yeah.
Higgins had six targets in that game, which is confusing because I must have something wrong with the stats. He had 16 attempts, so he had the most targets. Higgins had most of the targets at the game. A.J. Brown had 3, he had 6, etc. So anyway, you got to decide whether you the salary is very cheap, so he's a good opportunity, and you got to just hope that they can throw the ball, and it is Houston. So
yep.
Maybe that's a very good opportunity there with that salary, despite the ownership.
Despite the ownership and despite them being the Bengals.
Yes.
All right, so getting to the next one here, just a play I think that's way too cheap. It's going to be Jamison Crowder, 4,500 versus Cleveland at the 47-point game total, where the Jets are 9.5-point underdogs. And Crowder is averaging 14.5 DraftKings points per week, and he started out the year really hot, but has cooled down as of late. But of course, he has battled some injuries, and it seems way too cheap for Crowder for the volume that he gets. Very good matchup against a poor Browns passing defense, and should be coming from behind, leading to more passing attempts as well. Possible garbage upside if the Browns get too far ahead. So I think Crowder at 4,500 is not a bad look, and I'm assuming he's going to be extremely low owned here.
Actually, he's 7.7% owned, which is higher than you would think, but definitely not ultra high. And he has been coming back, and it was really interesting. Of course, the Jets were the Jets, and a lot of things happen, and the quarterback gets hurt, etc. He was hotter than hot, and then he just dried up. And a lot of the theory was, well, there were people out, and maybe he's not that great. But at $4,500, and the thing about Cleveland is, they're missing the receivers, all those receivers. Cleveland's going to run the ball. That may slow the game down. That may run the clock. But if they're not successful, if Cleveland's not successful as they usually are in running the clock, that means the Jets are going to have more opportunities and more snaps in the offensive snaps. So Crowder may be a very tempting player there, even though he's 7.7% owned.
Oh, yeah. Very interesting. Nice cheap play there. And there is another nice cheap play I like, and it's going to be Marvin Hall, 3,000 versus the Jets. You got the 45-point game total where the Browns are 7-point favorites. And just like a minimum price pump play here. The Browns are missing, you named it, Landry, Higgins, Peoples-Jones, Hodge, all those. So Hall now becomes the wide receiver 1 for Cleveland at 3K, which is insane. And just a very good matchup against the poor Jets defense, who is very, very bad versus the pass and very, very bad in general. And just solid upside overall at a very cheap price. And you really don't need much at 3K, but I actually think there's some decent upside with him being pretty much the number 1 target at wide receiver. I'm assuming they're going to use their tight ends a lot. Obviously, they're going to use their running backs a lot. But with him being the number 1 guy at wide receiver, I do think there's some solid upside. And I'm really curious to hear the ownership.
1.6%. Extremely low. Yeah, you almost got to just get him in at least one of your lineups, depending on how many lineups you are, just in case.
Oh, yeah.
He's had some big games for Detroit. Obviously, he's not the greatest. He got cut or whatever, or released by Detroit and picked up by Cleveland. But yeah, opportunity is here. Yeah, $3,000. That's pretty neat. That is a very tempting play, at least to get him in a little bit. Fantastic.
Oh yeah, definitely. So. The other two guys I want to talk about. Here's another cheap guy, Cam Sims for Washington. So McLaurin is out, and Cam Sims is very cheap as well, 3,300. Should be the number one wide receiver on that team since McLaurin is out. I should see that increase in targets. Did have like 8 targets last week as well. So I think Cam Sims at 3,300 is really interesting going against the Panthers. Not the best matchup in the world, but not the worst matchup in the world as well. So I think Cam Sims is somebody else you can go to for a really cheap price there.
Yeah, he is actually at 5.7% owned. Which makes sense with Terry out. People are leaning on that game.
Mm-hmm.
So he's $3,300, fantastic play. The thing we have to worry about a little bit there in Washington is Alex Smith is kind of fuzzy of whether he's going to play today. So you've got to decide if you trust Haskins to get this guy the ball. I think that's a question you have to ask yourself. It's a 2 p.m. game. I'm Mountain Time. It's the late game today, so you're probably not going to know about Alex. So you may want to have to assume Haskins may be playing, and then you've got to decide whether that affects your decision about playing this guy. But obviously he's the number one wide receiver this week, assuming Terry doesn't play, and Terry he will not play. So it's not official, but supposedly he's not going to play. Terry's not going to play. So Cam Simmons is the number one receiver right now in Washington going into the game this week.
Yep, and McLaurin's someone that gets the ball thrown to him a ton, so those targets have to go somewhere.
Yes, they do. Carolina, not the greatest defense, so somebody there is going to be scoring some points, you would think, for Washington. And that's why I mentioned McKissick earlier as a guy who's tempting, although we already realized that Gibson's only $200 more expensive, so
yeah,
Gibson's probably the better play. Anyway, it's too bad McKissick is at 6,400. That is it's obviously annoying me.
Oh yeah, I know.
Anyway,
I agree.
Cam Sims is an interesting play today.
Yep, and then the last one I do want to touch on is going to be Russell Gage for Atlanta going against the Chiefs here, 5,100, averaging 10.9 DraftKings points, and he has been doing well as of late. And Julio Jones is out, so the Falcons should be throwing the ball a lot, coming from behind. They're about 10-point underdogs, and just a really cheap price here for Gage in a game that has the highest total on the slate, a potential shootout. So Russell Gage is somebody I'm really looking to, and I don't mind the Matt Ryan, Gage, Godwin, Ridley stack. I don't mind that. I don't mind Russell Gage as a run back option from the Chiefs stacks as well. So Russell Gage at 5,100 is not a bad look.
Yeah, he's the 7th most owned wide receiver, 10.2%. So he's gotten some interest with Julio out. He did produce quite well last week against the Buccaneers. What did he have, if I can see today? He had 10 targets. He had the second most targets behind Ridley, who had 14. 5 catches, 68 yards, a touchdown last week. That's definitely a very intriguing opportunity to start Russell Gage in your DFS.
Oh, yeah.
$5,100. Yep, I like that.
And then the last one I throw. This one's really interesting. It's going to be Mike Williams, 4,500. So if Keenan Allen does not play, I think Mike Williams is going to be the number one wide receiver on that team at a very cheap price. And we've seen it. Mike Williams does have some decent upside and probably going to be really low owned as well against this Denver defense. So Mike Williams is somebody I'm really looking at 4,500.
Yeah, that's an excellent play. 3.7% owned. He is not highly owned. Now, that may go up as we approach kickoff time, because if we really, if it becomes more evident that Keenan's not going to play, that may go up a little bit. 3.7%. I like that play. $4,500. Whoa. Yeah, that's an excellent. I'm going to have to get in some of my lineups, no doubt about it.
Because he's had big games this year before, 30.9, 21, 17. So he can definitely do it. And with Keenan Allen, if he does not play, I think he could have a ton of upside here.
Yeah, somebody's got to get those catches. I think they're still gonna do well like they did last week when Keenan went out early in the game. So
Yep.
yeah, I've got him on my list. Gonna have to get him in these lineups.
So was there anybody else you wanted to throw out?
You nailed the ones that I had. I'm just kind of glancing over real quick. That's kind of it. It's interesting that McCole Hardman for Kansas City is 7.6%. Of course, he's $3,100.
Yep.
He's fairly high up there. And Sammy Watson's in the top 10 at 10% owned. So I think that may have been the concern of Hill early in the week. I'm not really sure. Of course, they are playing Atlanta, so those are kind of interesting numbers there. Hardman's a tough play, but $3,100. Obviously, people think he's going to have some effect, but I don't know if I believe that.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not sure. I'm not that excited about that.
Yeah, if Hill's like limited, or if he doesn't, and if they're conservative with him, I guess he's going to be fine. But if Hill is fully healthy, I don't really see it. But he is cheap. He is $3,100. That's pretty cheap there.
Yeah, that definitely is something to think about. But I probably won't do it. I don't know why. I just don't feel good about that.
Yeah, like a boom or bust play, probably. Yeah.
Yeah, $3,100 is tempting. So
Yeah,
that's it. I don't have any other ones off the top here that you already caught the ones that I was considering.
All right, so we'll move into tight ends then, and starting with Travis Kelsey, and he is $8,500. I believe this is the most expensive he's been all year, and I mean, rightfully so, going against Atlanta, averaging 22.1 DraftKings points, and he has the highest upside out of all the tight ends by far, but he is very expensive. But he has a very good matchup against this Falcons passing defense, and I'm probably going to go to him quite a bit. He is going to be the number one owned tight end for a good reason, just the amount of upside. It's really hard to ignore. And at the beginning of the week, I thought it was going to be really hard to go up and get a Kelsey, but there's been so much value that's opened up over the week. I think it's pretty easy to get Travis Kelsey into the lineups at this point. So I'm going to be going to Travis Kelsey quite a bit here, even at that price of $8,500.
And you're right, the number one owned tight end at 20.8%. So despite the $8,500, he's just so consistent.
Yeah.
And against Atlanta, he's just a guy that people are still going to. So he's a chalky guy, but he's a very consistent guy. It's tight end's a tough situation. It's hard to get a really great tight end each week. So sometimes you have to pay up.
Oh, yeah. It is very inconsistent, and there isn't many good plays this week. Another play I do like is going to be Logan Thomas, 4,900 versus Carolina. Got a 44.5-point game total where Washington's going to be 2.5-point favorites. And Thomas is averaging 11 DraftKings points per week and has been going off as of late, scoring 26, 10, 24, and 13 in his last 4 games, averaging a little bit over 10 targets in his last 3 games as well. And I think he had like 15 targets last week also. Just a solid matchup against the Panthers team who isn't great versus the tight end. And I've been talking about Logan Thomas pretty much all year, saying that he gets so many targets, but at the beginning of the year he hasn't really been doing anything with them. But now he's starting to finally put it together late in the season. And 15 targets last week. I'm not expecting 15, but I can expect 10 plus, especially with McLaurin being out. Those targets have to go to somebody. And I think a lot of them will go to Logan Thomas here. So 4,900. The only thing is they did price him up a little bit, but I still think it's a solid play there against Carolina.
Well, he's the 4th most owned tight end at 7%, so he's down a little from the top guys. Like you said, he's finally producing. They're in the playoff hunt. They need this game. They're playing Carolina. McLaurin's out. I just worry about Haskins. If Haskins can be the quarterback, but I would assume, Logan Thomas may be, a nice a guy to throw to for those short passes for Haskins, assuming Haskins plays and if Alex doesn't play. But it's a tempting play. $4,900 is still not bad. I like that. I may have to sneak him in a few lineups.
Yeah, I don't mind it at all. The next guy, Dallas Goedert, 3,600 versus Dallas. You got the 49.5-point game total where the Eagles are 2-point favorites. And he is averaging 11.3 DraftKings points per week. And as we know, Zach Ertz has returned, but he's still getting a decent amount of targets. He's still, playing more than Ertz, and 8 targets last week versus Arizona. Solid matchup versus this Cowboys passing defense. It just seems way too cheap for at 3,600, and really don't mind a Goddard and Hurts stack. Honestly, if I'm playing Hurts, Goddard is the only one I'm really comfortable stacking with. So for that reason, I will have some Dallas Goddard this week.
Yeah, $3,600. He's the second most owned tight end, 10.4%. But crikey, $3,600 against the Cowboys, and he's been getting the targets. He may not, he may not be getting the most out of those targets yet. But at that price, I know he's owned high. I like that. It's hard to get away from Goddard here. I like that. That's very tempting. Yeah. $3,600.
Way too cheap.
I mean, Logan Thomas is what, $1,300 more dollars. I'm gonna have to think about that in the next couple of hours.
Oh yeah, nice discount off of Logan Thomas, and for sure Travis Kelsey.
Yeah, huge.
All right, and then this is the final tight end I do want to talk about. It's going to be Austin Hooper, who is 3,500 versus the Jets. You get the 45-point game total, where the Browns are 7-point favorites. And just a very cheap punt tight end play here, averaging 7.8 DraftKings points per week. Should see an increase in targets, probably a big increase in targets, you'd think, with the Browns missing Landry Higgins, Peoples-Jones, and Hodge, and all them. And just a very cheap option here with some upside against a poor Jets passing defense. I think if they want to attack this Jets passing defense, they can, although they don't really have the weapons to do so, but the Jets passing defense is just so bad. And I do think Cooper will get some extra work with all those guys out.
Yeah, 6.6% owned. He's up there a little bit, but you got to expect that. Like you said, may get a lot more targets today with all those players being out. He's a very intriguing play. $3,500 is a nice price for Austin Hooper this week.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the only concern I have is this, if they run the ball like every single play, which is possible, but when they do pass, they got to throw it to somebody, and it's probably going to be a lot of Austin Hooper.
Yep, I like that play.
Was there any other tight end you wanted to throw out?
Well, you hit the ones I had suggested. I'm just going to throw this guy's name out here, Tyler Higbee at Seattle. Huge game for both teams. He's 2.9% owned. It's fairly low, so he may be an intriguing play given the low ownership, and he did have a pretty good game last week.
Yep.
I'm not sure if I'll play him, but he's a tempting guy to play this week with that low ownership in GPP.
Yep, and a good matchup.
Excellent. Yeah, that's the only one I have off the top of my head.
Okay. So we'll talk about defense real quickly. I mean, the defense is really ugly this week. There's not many plays that stick out. I guess the three I do want to talk about, the Bears defense, 3,600 versus Jacksonville. Jacksonville missing their main guy in James Robinson. And good defense overall. And like I mentioned, I think James Robinson not playing could be a huge factor there. But the Bears defense is a little bit pricey at 3,600. Other than that, the Seahawks defense going against the Rams, 2,600, averaging 6.5 DraftKings points. Seattle's Seahawks defense has actually been looking good as of late, really good as of late. And the Rams are missing Cam Akers, so that could affect him a little bit. And Goff has been turning the ball over as of late. And then the other one, the Texans defense, I know it's ugly, but they are going against Cincinnati, 2,800, averaging only 3.7 DraftKings points. Just a really good matchup against this Bengals offense that is missing Joe Mixon, Tyler Boyd, guys like that. So those are probably the three I'm looking at. Other than that, like, not much really sticks out to me.
Yeah, and Houston is number one rated, number one owned defense at basically 16%. The Bears are second at 12%. And Seattle is down at 2.2%. So they're the most lowest owned of the three that you're talking about. So yeah, I like to think about that one. That's
yep, Seattle is at home as well. So.
Oh, are they really?
Yeah, so I do like that. Houston's at home. Yep, and then the Bears are away.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I like playing Seattle at home. They're tough at
yep.
home.
And typically, I wouldn't mind punting down a defense, but the Jets defense down there, the Falcons defense against the Kansas City, so the Jacksonville Jaguars defense is not looking good. There's really no punts I'd really go to this week.
Yeah. I don't know if Philadelphia at Dallas, with Dalton, I don't know. Yeah, that's a tough play right there.
Defense is tough this week for sure, but it's always tough.
Nothing jumps out at you.
Yeah, it's always tough at defense, really, though, so nothing really changed.
It's so much fun though to nail
Oh, yeah.
a defense. It's just frosting on the cake in DFS. So
Oh yeah, it's tough, but when it happens, it's nice.
fantastic.
All right, well, that's about it for me.
Fantastic. Well, great. Good luck, everybody. Good luck, Brady. It's our last clean weekend
Oh
before we
yeah.
get to the crazy week 17. So good luck, everyone. Thanks a lot, Brady.